I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of 27th, 2025. And of course, we do have some important information to go through. As I said yesterday, there are many things we need to be praying about, many things we need to be concerned about as they involve when we are in human history. Some of the situations which are taking place in the world: Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, Iran, ongoing questions regarding the Far East, etc. But the Lord is in control, and it is our job as mature believers to be able to sort through these different matters. So with that in mind, getting started on our theology roundup, we have a very interesting topic to review. And this is an FAQ entry recently added to the Volume 2 section on Messianic Apologetics. Now, on MessianicApologetics.net, to just briefly review for you, here you see the FAQ tab, and underneath it, the Volume 2 tab. And I am presently working through different Volume 2 entries, frequently asked questions. Whenever the book gets large enough, we will release Volume 2, so it's ongoing. It's not on a particular timetable. But one of the entries recently added, these are all in alphabetical order, scroll down to the letter R, and you'll see return the Messiah not knowing its time. So click there, and then a PDF file will open up. And this is something which kind of intersects both eschatology, the end times, with, of course, the nature of Yeshua, because we've all had this question, and it comes out once in a while in Messianic discussion. Certainly, a lot of people in Hebrew roots bring this up because many of them don't believe Yeshua is God. But it's something I think anyone who believes in Yeshua wonders about from time to time. So, return the Messiah not knowing its time. The Messiah told his disciples that he did not know the time of his return. Could this possibly mean that the Messiah was not God? Have you ever asked yourself that question? So we have a frequently asked question entry about it logically. Okay, because the two main verses which concern this, but of that day or that hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Mark 13:32. But no one knows of that day and hour, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Matthew 24:36. Both of those from the World Messianic Bible. Okay, so how do you sort through this? Because surely there have been many people over the centuries who've had to weigh with this question. Yeshua, Jesus, is God, right? And that only the Father knows. So does that mean that the Son is God? Or what do we do with this? The statement made by Yeshua the Messiah in his Olivet Discourse about the time of his return has generated no small discussion about his nature. No one knows about the day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Matthew 24:36, New International Version. That this statement does feature in any analysis as to whether or not Yeshua is the eternal, uncreated Son of God or a created supernatural agent sent by God is obvious, given the conclusions of those who hold to a low Christology. Commenting on Mark 13:32, one proponent of a low Christology forthrightly concludes, quote, This statement of Jesus that the Son of God does not know the time of the parousia, coming, rules out any dogma about Jesus being God himself, unquote. For Matthew 24:36, this same person just states, quote, proving beyond all argument that the Son of God cannot be God, unquote. And I am sure that some of you in your interactions or exchanges with various people have likely encountered something similarly. So, what do we do about this? The logic offered is that if God is an omnipotent being, knowing all things, and that if Yeshua said in Mark 13:32 and Matthew 24:36 that the Son does not know the time of the second coming, thus Yeshua cannot be God. Proponents of a high Christology would first counter such logic by interjecting the reminder that there are claims made in the apostolic writings or New Testament of Yeshua of Nazareth, which would be considered blasphemy to the God of Israel if Yeshua is not, in fact, integrated into the divine identity. Secondly, since the early centuries of emerging Christianity, it has not gone unnoticed that passages such as Mark 13:32 and Matthew 24:36 do need to be reckoned with. An evangelical Protestant voice, such as D.A. Carson, who doubtlessly holds to a high Christology of Yeshua being God, critically observes for Matthew 24:36. Quote, Jesus' self-confessed ignorance on this point has generated not a little debate. In fact, it is part of the New Testament pattern of his humiliation and incarnation, e.g., 20 verse 23, Luke 2:52, Acts 1:7, Philippians 2:7. John's Gospel, one of the four Gospels most clearly insisting on Jesus' deity, also insists with equal vigor on Jesus' dependence on and obedience to his Father, a dependence reaching even to his knowledge of the divine. How New Testament insistence on Jesus' deity is to be combined with New Testament insistence on his ignorance and dependence is a matter of profound importance to the church, and attempts to jettison one truth for the sake of preserving the other must be avoided, unquote. Matthew 24:36, about him not knowing the time of his return, is connected to approaches which recognize the legitimate humanity of the Messiah. In the Carmen Christi hymn, it is detailed how Yeshua emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. Philippians 2:7, New Revised Standard. And as such, it is often deduced that some limitations in terms of Yeshua's having existed in the form of God, Philippians 2:6, were voluntarily taken on in his human incarnation. Far be it from the simple conclusion of Yeshua not knowing in his Olivet Discourse the time of the second coming must prove that he is not God. Those who hold to a high Christology tend to emphasize that as a result of the Son's human incarnation and willful submission to the Father, Philippians 2:6 and 7, the Son only exercised in his ministry and teachings the divine privileges permitted to him by the Father. In his commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, Michael J. Wilkins usefully directs, quote, while he did not in any sense give up his deity, Jesus voluntarily limited the use of those divine characteristics so that he could experience human life in its entirety. Hebrews 4:14 through 16. It was only at the will of his Father that he could use his divine attributes, if it was the Father's will for him to do so. He acted primarily in his humanity and was empowered by the Spirit. The independent use of his supernatural knowledge was limited to whether it was the Father's will for him to use it. In his earthly ministry, Jesus came to do the will of his Father in heaven. It was not the Father's will for him to know the date of his return during his time on earth, unquote. A survey of the Olivet Discourse should reveal enough signs and phenomena which are to take place and be in motion up until the time of the Messiah's return. Yeshua stating, "36, Revised Standard Version, does not preclude any one of us from accurately predicting or at least speculating upon the general season of the Messiah's return. The exact time, as stated by Yeshua, was not known to him as he spoke to his disciples on the Mount of Olives. Instead, the admonitions which Yeshua issued, per the contents of Matthew 24 and 25 following, were designed to direct his followers to demonstrate the proper actions and attitudes so that they would not be swept up by the deception to befall many. If Yeshua was only permitted to speak words given to him by the Heavenly Father, John 12, 49 and 50, but yet Yeshua was one who voluntarily took on humanity in his incarnation and voluntarily submitted himself to the humiliation of execution and death. Philippians 2:8, Mark 14:36, Matthew 26:39, Luke 22:42. Then it stands to reason that Yeshua, not knowing the time of his future return, is to be taken as him not being permitted to know about it for the purposes of his first century CE earthly ministry. So it is not as though no theologian throughout history, much less in the more modern period, has not had to sort through this issue of, well, Yeshua said that he didn't know the time of his return. Does that prove he is not God? It's a part of Yeshua's having emptied himself. It's part of Yeshua in his humanity relying upon his Father and his cities. So I recommend that you make use of this frequently asked questions entry. It's in the volume 2 section under the letter R. And indeed, we've got a lot of information in our ministry archives addressing these kinds of issues regarding the nature of Yeshua. So appreciate those of you who reached out to me, direct messaged me, hey, can you consider talking about this on Messianic Insider? Okay, so that finishes up today's theology roundup. And we always do the news roundup afterward because all of the news we go through is time sensitive. Things can change from day to day. For example, one thing we might report on regarding the Israel-Hamas conflict or Russia-Ukraine could change tomorrow, very significantly, in fact. That's what we saw over the weekend with some things. All of the links we're going to be going through, you can access yourself when this episode is archived later at messianicapologetics.net. Okay, so let's get started. Our first story comes from Open Source Intel yesterday, May the 26th, so this would have been after yesterday's episode. Wild report, Hamas in crisis, Gaza command cuts off overseas leadership, faces internal collapse. According to Ohad Hamo, Palestinian affairs correspondent for Israeli Channel 12, Hamas's military leadership in Gaza has cut ties with its overseas leadership, exposing a growing internal fracture. All agree with each other. They're not all on the same page. Hamas commanders in Gaza opposed the release of American-Israeli hostage Idan Alexander, but gave in under heavy pressure from Qatari officials who demanded his release as a goodwill gesture to the U.S. Okay, so some of this. At the same time, Hamas is in financial freefall, according to Ajrak Ashak al-Zat, sorry about that, government employees in Gaza have been paid just 900 shekels, about $250 total over 4 months. The military wing reportedly hasn't received salaries in 3 months. Yeah, if you don't get paid, guess what? You start having problems. Of course, this is just information. How much of it is accurate, how much of it is inaccurate, hard to say. Our next story, I thought this was interesting. This ran across my social media feed last night. Schools are removing analog clocks because teenagers can no longer read them. Recent reports show that several schools in the UK, especially in exam rooms, have replaced analog clocks with digital ones after discovering that many teenagers can't tell time using the clock face. Officials attribute this gap to the dominance of smartphones and digital time displays in students' daily lives. That's pretty sad. And I think that is more sad than people not, for example, knowing how to write in cursive. For example, look at what I've got on right here. Yes, it's a Timex, but this is a normal hour sign, the hour hand and the minute hand. It's unfortunate that many people can't use that anymore, and how much of that has come because of a reliance on technology. I'm the kind of person, I still use legal pads. I think that, digital clocks are great, but I have some things which use the 24-hour digital clock. So, for example, it's 1:17 p.m. Central Standard Time on my computer right now, but I know that it's also 13:17 or 13:18. So, people need to know how to use multiple methods of telling time, whether they use it 12 hours, 24 hours, digital, or analog. Okay, this ran across my social media feed. This was upsetting to see, but it raises an important point, which all of us in the Messianic community, especially if we're in the diaspora, if we're in North America, we're in the United States, and we interact with a lot of conservative Christians. Excuse me. This is something we're going to have to deal with more and more frequently. Anti-Semitism, burning of an Israeli flag. Pro-Semitism, coffins covered with a U.S. flag. Now, what is being communicated by this? This is for Memorial Day. Well, an act of anti-Semitism or anti-Judaism, anti-Zionism means you're burning the Israeli flag and you oppose the state of Israel in some way. But if you're pro-Semitic, if you're pro-Zionist, the way you demonstrate you're going to start hearing more and more frequently. How accurate is it? How inaccurate is it? Hopefully the conflicts America, the United States, is involving itself with in the Middle East are for America's interests every bit as much as they are for the interests of our allies and partners, including Israel, including some of the moderate Islamic states. But you're going to see more and more of this. Here's a post which came across my X feed earlier today. UK, Parliament to debate halal slaughter ban after petition reaches 100,000 signatures. The Muslim Council of Britain warns this could lead to a Muslim exodus from the country. Should halal slaughter be banned? In all probability, halal slaughter will not be banned in Western countries which support religious freedom, religious tolerance. But this is coming mainly from a push, whether it's in the United Kingdom, other Arab countries, Canada, etc., where the Muslim bloc wants to see basically all or most commercially processed meats be halal. So, for example, if you go to a Burger King, you go to a McDonald's, you go to one of the fast foods, well, we serve halal here. And even in the United States, there are different commercial restaurants which will now advertise that their meat is slaughtered halal. Here, even in North Texas, there's a chicken fingers chain which says that their chicken is slaughtered halal. Now, I know to a lot of Messianic people, halal slaughtered meat as the animal is slaughtered. This is a decision you have to make for yourself. I don't purchase halal slaughtered meat, even though you see a lot of it, particularly at a Costco, where all of the lamb is halal slaughtered from Australia. But I don't believe that halal slaughtered should be banned. Just like with kosher slaughtered, they can have their own stores. They can have their own restaurants, but that doesn't need to be universal for everyone. But this does demonstrate, of course, that we live in a world of increasing religious conflict. And yes, it's not going to be easily managed. Okay, our next story from Open Source Intel yesterday, May the 26th. The IDF has started grinding down building ruins across Gaza to stop terrorists from using the rubble as cover, according to Ma'ariv Online. Large parts of Gaza will be left in total devastation. Yeah, and this is why there are a lot of people who are getting really upset about this whole Gaza situation. IDF's having to come in and grind down the rubble so the rubble isn't used as a means for terrorists to hide. And the situation continues to unfold, whether you like it or not. Okay, so here you have the New York Post, the front page for today. Republican lawmakers are calling for crippling sanctions. Likewise, this is an ongoing situation. Is it going to be able to be resolved or not? Open Source Intel, May the 27th. So from today, Reuters, Israel and Syria have entered direct contact in recent weeks, holding in-person meetings focused on reducing tensions and avoiding conflict. This marks a shift from earlier Reuters reports of indirect talks via the UAE. This is an ongoing situation as well. You've got Gaza, which is absolutely devastated. Then you've got Israel, Syria, opening up lines of communication, talking to each other, moving toward Syria likely signing on to the Abraham Accords. The Middle East is changing in many ways. Okay, this is a story. Actually, my mother passed it on to me from Breitbart. This is from yesterday, the 26th of May. Noam, that's Kristi Noam, the Homeland Security Secretary. I want to get that right. Gaza aid often funds Hamas. Israelis know how to get aid to civilians. Now, of course, you've got multiple perspectives on aid reaching Gaza. Does Hamas suck it out and the people don't get it, and that's what keeps Hamas going? Do you actually have Israel allowing the absolute minimum to get to the people? Do you have Israel noting that Hamas you'll read. So this is an article. It's useful for you to review it. Instagram, this kind of changes the subject a little, but it does continue a number of the points we raised yesterday from the Instagram channel, The Business Magnets. Japan has developed universal artificial blood that doesn't need compatibility matching and lasts much longer than regular blood. Japan develops universal artificial blood with an extended lifespan and no compatibility matching needed. Now, yesterday, one of the reports talked about artificial wombs and, of course, how that is something which a lot of people have seen from science fiction, and how in the future, certain science fiction series, women don't carry a child to term in the womb. Rather, children are decanted from artificial wombs. And that, of course, is something which gets a lot of people upset. Less people would probably be upset about some kind of artificial blood, especially given some of the health matters over the past 4 to 5 years. Of course, this is something which has to be tested. It has to be, screened. It has to be, peer reviewed, etc. But a lot of people would look at artificial blood along the same lines of, curing polio or people trying to cure the common cold. Accidents happen, people lose blood, they need it, there's only so much blood available. Well, is it possible to produce artificial blood, which can go to various different blood sort through matters? Okay, we got 3 more stories from New York Post on Instagram. Oh, this is not fun. The cover-up of former President Joe Biden's mental decline might be a bigger scandal than Watergate, CNN host Jake Tapper acknowledged Monday. Yeah, this is not going to be fun. Not going to be fun to have to sort through Joe Biden, his prostate cancer, the auto pen. Was he truly in charge of his faculties or not? Or was he just kind of, almost a mannequin? Hey, go there, go over there, say this, don't say that. And other people were actually calling the shots behind the scenes. That's not going to be fun. And it's hitting a lot of the, mainstream news sources. All right, this came across my feed, and I've seen it in several other feeds as well. This is from Instagram, the channel Wealth. Scientists say aliens could contact Earth by 2019. Of course, if you follow the Star Trek timeline, April the 5th, 2063 is when the Vulcans make first contact with Earth. But here, we got something even sooner, possibly. Researchers believe extraterrestrials may have intercepted a radio signal we sent in 2002. Oh, great. New analysis, by astronomers at UC Berkeley and UCLA using Gaia star mapping data. The team traced signals beamed by NASA's Deep Space Network to Pioneer 10 in 2002 and calculated that if any civilization near the white dwarf star it reached chooses to answer, their photons could complete the round trip within 6 years. And likewise, those of you who know anything about Star Trek, Pioneer 10, Star Trek 5, Captain Claw's Klingon bird of prey used that as target practice. But more seriously, this is going to be something which is likely going to hit various news cycles. Alien beings, extraterrestrials, contacting Earth by 2029. Now, a great number of you, anything involving extraterrestrials, aliens, you classify that along the lines of the Genesis 6, Nephilim, fallen angels, demonic entities, and okay, that's fine. But there are going to be a lot of people in the greater religious world who are going to start asking questions because of things like this regarding, well, how do we know God doesn't have other plans, other stories, I think is better put, playing out in other parts of the universe. There's even an entire branch of theology now emerging known as exotheology or astrotheology to address these very questions. And it's not something which is easy to sort through. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen by 2029. But what we do know for certain is that we have to monitor information, and there are conversations coming which are very uncomfortable. And one of the things which, and maybe I'm pulling from some of my and commonly associate this kind of stuff with is, well, why do we see, especially since the 1950s to the present, supposed UFO and alien encounters, abductions on the increase? Well, at least in one science fiction genre, the V series. Some of y'all might remember V from the early 1980s, and then they did a remake 2009, 2010. What caused the visitors, that's what they called the aliens, to pay attention to Earth was the atomic age and the detonation of nuclear weapons. Hey, we just know people are talking about this, and it's better for us to be prepared than not prepared. Okay, and then finally, and this is from Open Source Intel today, May the 27th, Al Jazeera is now unintentionally exposing that Hamas has lost control in Gaza and that many Palestinians are defying them and willing to work directly with Israel. For that alone, this is already worth it. Yeah, I would not look at every single person in Gaza, every single person in the West Bank as being anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah, whatever it might be. There's never 100% agreement among some of these groups. And yeah, it would be interesting to see if, after a year and a half of all this, military activity on the part of Israel, for Hamas to suddenly collapse because the people they're supposed to defend suddenly turn against them and things are not working out the way that they had hoped. So there are a lot of things going on in the world right now. One of the important things I do stress regarding Messianic Insider, because we go 5 times a week, idea about what to focus on for our theology roundup. And of course, we monitor a lot of stories which other people, and I mean this with a lot of love and respect, in the Messianic community are not comfortable addressing. But we are quickly approaching the halfway point in the year 2025. And we have to keep that in mind. There's a point in your development as a believer, your development as a mature man or woman of God, where you have to be willing to discuss matters, discuss issues which are uncomfortable. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.